Why make 3 bikes with 3 different frames when you can make one frame that can be built up 3 different ways? Why use many word when few word do trick? Well, Trek aims to answer at least one of these questions with their all-new fuel. The fuel has been in Trek's lineup for over 25 years at this point, and originally it started its life as a cross-country race bike. But over the years, it has undergone changes that have transformed it, and it's able to take on burlier and bigger terrain. Nowadays, you can get the fuel in 3 main flavors, with the differences being travel, wheel size, and of course, geometry. So just like a Whopper, you can have it your way. Let's start with the Fuel EX, the littlest option. It's got 150 millimeters of travel up front, 145 millimeters in the rear, and 29-inch wheels, allowing you to tackle a wider variety of trails. Next up, we have the Fuel MX. Travel jumps up to 160 millimeters up front, 150 in the rear, and you get a mullet wheel size setup. This geometry is also slightly more aggressive. At the risk of angering Mike Kazmer, I'm going to call this the more playful option. Finally, you have the Fuel LX. Travel jumps up to a whopping 170 millimeters up front, 160 in the rear, 29-inch wheels, and even more aggressive geometry. I'm going to call this the most smashiest option. Now, you can blur the lines between these bikes and get pretty wild with customization by swapping things like shock links and mounts. For example, Mike Kazmer is running the LX build but with a mullet wheel size setup, because he can. All of these frames feature the ability to run an angle set. When you swap out the rocker and or lower shock mount, your progression also changes. LX has the highest progression, EX the lowest. Different wheel sizes, in-frame storage, and the choice of carbon or aluminum. There's enough choices here to give Baskin-Robbins a run for their money. Now I know what you're saying. Are all these models and options really necessary? Does 10 millimeters of travel make a difference? What about half a degree of head angle? Well, I'm going to make a bold claim and say, yeah, it probably matters. But because this is Pinkbike, we are going to have to do some science. Well, pseudoscience. I've gone ahead and designed a little test loop to test these bikes head to head to head. So we've come here to the woods where there are trails. The loop starts off with a mellow climb and then right into a descent, which is rougher up top and a little bit mellower at the bottom. We're going to time the whole loop as well as each section to see where each bike shines. Now, enough talking, let's get riding. Well, this isn't going to be the most riveting footage, but we are starting off with our climb here. This is the Fuel in the EX configuration. That meaning should be able to excel at both the climb and the descent, but maybe not be the fastest in both categories. We are going to avoid the skinny. I think that will skew our results. Do got to appreciate the double 29er for just that extra bit of rollover. Does 1.5 inches really matter? Sound off in the comments below. Now I know what you're saying. Jason, you would have to do this hundreds of times, if not thousands, to be scientific. Yeah, obviously. This isn't that. It's pseudoscience. Ditch big 2, start the clock. I'm gonna say on a nice 70%. Okay, this bike is quite quick. Man, for just 150, 145, pretty dang aggressive. And that is time. So, first run done on the Fuel EX flavor. First impressions, let's start with the climbing. Climbed quite efficiently, it was quite comfortable, easy to get along with, and then dropping right into the descent. That top part is quite rough, and you know, we had some rain over the last couple days, made things a bit looser, a bit slipperier. Easy to go too fast and throw yourself in on this thing, which I think bodes well for when we kind of up the travel numbers, because we can just go harder and harder supposedly. But as we got down kind of in this zone towards the lower section, it mellows out quite a bit, and it actually does require you to keep your speed up and pump and milk the trail, and that is absolutely where this shines. First impressions, they're nice. Can't wait to go do another lap. All right, thanks to the magic of editing and time travel, we have a whole new bike, kind of. Starting at the front, we have a 160 mil fork instead of 150. A little bit more travel, 5 mils in the rear, and then this is the big one, a smaller rear wheel. This is 27.5, so we are now mullet, party on. We also changed out the links and the little shock mount pieces here. So this bike should be a bit more playful. We'll see. We'll let the times do the talking. I'll have to go ride. We are off on the Fuel MX. Completely different bike, kinda. Immediately, feels pretty dang similar. My prediction for this lap, slightly slower on the climb with that smaller rear wheel. I wanna say slightly quicker on both the rough stuff and honestly, probably the bottom flatter, flowier stuff. But I do think it's really cool what Trek is doing here. With a small amount of spare parts, you can truly have a completely different bike. Oh, 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 oh. All right, and we are in. Let's go. Okay, this is where the differences are. Really noticeable through those corners. All right, now we're into the lower, flatter, still fast part. Oh, why not? Yeah, a little nicer in those tighter lifts. And into the end. And that's a Tesla Lupa 2. All right, lap done on the Fuel MX. This is, again, the mullet version, slightly longer travel, slightly more aggressive geometry. On the climb, it's hard to notice a difference, honestly. Smaller rear wheel, maybe a little bit more prone to hanging up on some of like the larger roots and rocks. Maybe a little bit easier to do those tight switchbacks. Really noticed going down. Immediately, the trail starts off with these two tight corners. I kind of just worked my way through them. This time I actually felt like I was able to kind of rail the bike and get the back end around a little bit easier. I will say on some of that faster, straighter chunk, I didn't feel as fast, honestly. I felt like I was feeling the holes a bit more, but again, kind of a minute detail. The times are gonna tell. Honestly, overall, felt slower. But I will say, on the jumps and the twisties, this was quite fun. More editing and more time travel later, and we have a new bike. This time, it looks quite different. Starting at the front, got a Fox 38 up there that is up to 170 millimeters of travel. Big old coil shock on the back, 160 mils. This is gonna slacken the geometry out quite a bit, make things more aggressive, and we're back to the Big Sally 29er in the rear. This is definitely the smashiest build, and I can't wait to go ride it, which I'm gonna do right now. All right, we are on the LX edition. Rough predictions right off the bat. Probably gonna be slower on the climb. The bike feels not crazy heavier, but it's definitely heavier. Added probably 2 to 3 pounds. It also feels still quite, I don't know, efficient, willing to be pedaled. My prediction is the speed might be pretty similar, but at the same time, might also just be a bit of a comfier ride. I got a lot of squish now. I do really appreciate the build kit on this bike. Coming with the Mavens, we have a little bit more weight that needs to be put on the front. Oh yeah. Okay, we're in. Wow. A lot more grip. Obviously could be attributed to the coil shock. Just a little bit more keen to hold the line through the chatter. Ooh, didn't feel like I had the pop. All right, test lap done on the Fuel LX. And as a visual to how much harder I worked on the climb, I will demonstrate. That being said, definitely noticed a difference jumping on this bike. Much bigger, kind of just feels more stout. But on the climb, the weight was pretty apparent. It must have grown by 2 or 3 pounds just by changing out those parts. And then also the slacker head angle. That climb does get steep in spots, and I could feel me needing to be a bit more forward on the bars to stop the old wandering. After the climb, dropped in immediately again, huge difference. It is quite loose and rough at the top. It was much easier, and I would say forgiving to hold those like rough, chattery, kind of squirmy lines on this bike. I'm excited to go back and look at the times, because if I had to guess, much slower on the climb, but on the descent and at least at the top, probably quicker. Down here, Very tough to say, I don't know. 3 test laps, results are in. First, let's talk about the bikes. Started off with the Fuel EX, that is the smallest one, 150 mils up front, 145 in the rear. My impressions were the bike is fast, it is quite sprightly on the uphill, and also quite quick on the downhill, and quite, I'm gonna use the term again, efficient. We then switched to the MX, and honestly, where I noticed the most change was on the climb. In those tight switchbacks, it was a little easier to pivot around that smaller wheel. And then pretty immediately on the descent, kind of in the corners again, just a little easier to whip that back end around. And then finally, we got the big dog, LX here. Way more perceived difference, especially in the climb. It was quite immediate. I would say that I was pedaling a heavier bike. Efficiency-wise, it felt fine though on the climb. You're in a comfortable seated position, kind of just scooting up there. Descent, again, pretty massive difference. Very planted, very plowy, schrappy. But let's talk about science, because we actually did a little bit of science. Okay, we've crunched the numbers. My brain is going to explode, but we have come to some conclusions here. In third place, we have our big dog LX. I'm sorry, buddy. Second place, the MX, the mullet. Very, very close to first place, which of course is the EX, the Fuel EX, the littlest travel, 29er front and rear, came out on top, but only by a couple seconds. And our test loop, right around 25 minutes, a couple seconds here or there, probably not that different. So I think that that kind of aligns with what I felt in terms of the bikes being quite similar. Some shine in some areas, some shine in the others. Let's talk about quickly this LX. Yes, it came last, but it came first on the descent. And that's kind of what you'd expect. It was a decent little bit shorter on the climb, about a minute or so. But when it came to going downhill, that's definitely where this bike shines. And the numbers support that. Now, obviously, this is pseudoscience. If we were gonna do this in a lab, we would do the same test track 1,000 times, but there's not enough Twinkies in the world to make me want to pedal that much. So if you want to look into the nitty gritty, we're gonna have a nice, beautiful chart somewhere on here on the screen. You can look at all the numbers. They all add up to some things, some conclusions. Well, there you have it. Turns out numbers matter, at least a little bit. And it's kind of cool. The Trek has built a bike that can be built for such a wide variety of terrain, just using one frame. It's kind of like you choosing your bread at Subway when you make a sandwich. Just kidding, there's only one option, that's Italian herbs and cheese. If you want to learn more about the Fuel, check out Mike Kasmer's review on the homepage. I think that'll be linked below. As for me, I think I'm gonna go for another ride. Maybe I'll do the LX, but I could do a mullet swap on it. There are so many options. I'm also not gonna ride the same trail. See you next time.